accounts as soon as possible. Now I want to go ahead and pass the microphone to my co-host all the way from DC, Matthew Herman, to introduce our speakers. Matt.
Half a day, and thank you, Crystal. Good morning to the folks in Guam. Good evening to the folks here in DC. We're very excited for this announcement here today, and it's great to see a lot of familiar faces here on the screen. I know you know, folks on Guam may have tried to get rid of me. You can't get rid of me yet. But as many of you know, I'm Matt Herman. I'm a consultant to Google, and we're here today to talk about the importance of technology and connectivity. Folks in the islands, more than almost anyone, understand the importance of technology and connectivity, and certainly in this post-COVID world. And we've got some very exciting announcements today that enhance that quite frankly will enable more of this in the future. So again, that is what we're here to talk about. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brian Quigley, who is Google's VP of Global Networks, to talk a little bit more about the project. Brian.
Half a day. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Governor, for being with us. I am very, very excited to announce the Central Pacific Connect initiative. It's consisting of 2 new subsea cables, which will increase connectivity throughout the Pacific. The first cable, Bulikula, is a cable that will connect Guam directly with Fiji. The second cable, Halailai, will connect Guam with French Polynesia. These cables are being built in collaboration with a number of other companies. A few of them I want to recognize today are Amalgamated Telecom Holdings, ATH, Telstra, as well as AP Telecom. This connectivity will result in a ring across the Pacific Islands, connecting Guam to French Polynesia to Fiji, and Fiji back to Guam. These cables are multi-year projects, 3 to 5 years at least, and we're anticipating a completion in 2026. When they're complete, Bulikula and Halailai will join our existing cable portfolio, which has several systems under construction to Guam: Echo, Apricot, and our newly announced TPU, Taiwan to Philippines cable, firmly establishing Guam as a hub connecting the Pacific. These cables are the evidence of the government's commitment to bridging the digital divide and strengthening the telecommunications infrastructure, not just across the island, but to all the islands of the Pacific. I want to start a little story of where did this come from? And I was just talking with the governor about the Pacific Island Forum in September of 2022, where I had the honor of attending as a Google representative. And I quickly discovered that the playbook that we developed at Google over the last 10 years plus in solving the world's communications problems need to be rewritten for the Pacific Islands. So I started a journey, and that journey was going and visiting the islands, realizing what the connectivity needs were. And I learned quite a lot. One of the things that I learned from the governor is the islands are a family, and it's not just about connecting one, it's about how can we improve connectivity for all of them. And Central Pacific Connect lays the trunk connectivity to benefit them all. I can tell you as a daughter or a father of 2 daughters, when the internet in my house goes down for 5 minutes, we think the world is coming to an end. I couldn't imagine the 6 weeks that the country of Tonga experienced when their single fiber optic cable was brought down by a subsea volcano. These are the types of problems in the new playbook that we're looking to solve, and we're very excited to make this journey. So I'm learning how to rethink connecting the world, reducing the digital divide, and I'll leave you with Biba Google, Biba Guam.
Biba.
Matt?
Thank you, Brian. This is indeed great news. And we are very lucky to have with us here this evening the governor of Guam, Governor Lou Leon Guerrero, who gets the pleasure tomorrow of testifying before the House Natural Resources Committee, but is here today for a part of this announcement. And Governor, I know this is something very close to your heart, very important for you. So we'd really appreciate getting your perspective on the importance of this project for Guam and the people of Guam.
Thank you very much, Matt. I want to especially thank Brian and Google for this great opportunity and to say this is a great honor to be here to celebrate the launch of this Pacific Connectivity Initiative. I know that in 2019, I met with Google through Matt, and I invited them over to Guam, and they were a little bit lukewarm. But I'm so glad that Brian had the opportunity to come to the Pacific Island Forum, or Summit actually, that was, of course, initiated by President Biden in his whole vision of connectivity. And the most, I think, important message that all the Pacific Island leaders from North, Central, and South is that they need digitalization. That was second to climate change. And the reason I bring that out is because, you know, Google laying down these basic infrastructure trunks is going to give a lot of opportunity and access to those little islands that can jump onto this, I think, great vision and initiative of Google to connect the Pacific, the South, Central, and the North. And what that does is this. It provides them the ability to have access to healthcare. They can do now telemedicine. They can now go on internet quickly. They can go on Zoom. They can get the resources that they need, especially for those health professionals that have very limited resources in those isolated islands. So there's a quality of healthcare delivery here. There's also the ability now for all government leaders to be able to speak together and don't have to fly thousands of miles and spend thousands of dollars to get their ideas going, to communicate, interact, interrelate, and talk about good ways that they can have to improve their quality of life. It also brings a lot of opportunity for more commerce, trade, and economy, and to improve whatever natural resources that they have there that they use to help them in their economic strength and growth. So having redundancy, resiliency, I think is a great initiative and a great backup for Google to continue this ability. And I think the islands will leap into a great advance in technology. And I just cannot clearly express how I am so satisfied. I feel like a complete governor, knowing that Guam is the center of this whole connectivity. And you know, Guam has always been very, very close neighbors, brothers and sisters to all the islands, and we all work together to improve ourselves, and we all work together to share. Just the other day, I had to send our medical examiner down to Palau for a forensic evaluation of a murder case. And the president was very, very appreciative. Those kinds of things go a very long way and is very much noted and acknowledged. And you just cannot believe how much of an appreciation and how much of a thankfulness and gratefulness I think our brothers and sisters in these islands will have in the completion of this great connectivity throughout the whole Indonesian Pacific region. It's a whole place that is now going to be open to great things, and it's because of Google. And I just want to thank Google, and I want to thank all the governments of the various islands that have seen this opportunity and are working very closely in partnership and relationship. And I'm just very grateful. And on behalf of the people of Guam, we express a sincere sidus masi for your vision and for realizing the importance of Guam as the central core hub for this connectivity that will provide great opportunities for improving the quality of life for our people in the Pacific, South, Central, and Northern regions. And so thank you. And Biba Google and Biba Guam, and thank you for your vision and for working very closely with us. And you're certainly very welcome to our island, and come to Guam and we'll show you the hospitality of a true islander, as you will see in all the other islands also. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Governor, and very much appreciate your vision about how Guam is a hub for a lot of this technology and this connectivity, and the role that Guam has historically played with its, the neighboring islands and so forth. I'm glad to see that a vision that you had shared early on is starting to come to fruition here in partnership with Google. But as we, I think people get the concept of what we're doing here today, but we've talked a little bit about subsea cables, and it probably behooves us to get into a little more detail of what that entails, what sort of is behind this project from a more technical standpoint. So Brian, I'll turn it back to you for a little bit more on what it takes to get these subsea cables in, and where we're going to go from here.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. So I think we'll have some slides coming up shortly, and we'll talk about subsea cable networking. And to be clear, I have the honor of representing a very large team to make this happen. And cables themselves are bigger than Google. Connecting the Pacific Islands is bigger than Google. It requires partnerships. It requires carrier partners, Fintel, OPT, Telstra, Vocus. We've recently announced the extension of French Polynesia to Chile, and really this is a large global investment. Certainly not just Google, and the government partnerships between Guam and the United States and Australia. So thank you. So let's talk a little bit about subsea cable networking. And on the next slide, one of the most common questions is, why does Google build cables? And there's really three reasons. It's reach, reliability, and resilience. Reach is about reducing the digital divide. I will tell you that the governor's comments about jumping on a plane and flying somewhere to have a video call, for a lot of us in this room, that's almost unfathomable, that you can't just pick up your phone and have a high-definition video call with anyone you've ever met in your life. And there are entire countries, there are entire places in this world where that simply isn't possible. Our first experience in really thinking about reducing the digital divide in a major way, or one of the most recent ones, is the Africa Equiano cable, where we built a cable from Portugal to South Africa, and it was going by the island of St. Helena. And the EU Development Bank was able to fund a branching unit to create the first fiber optic cable to St. Helena in the middle of the Atlantic and provide connectivity to a place that never had it before. Of course, in Google Way, where we always try to do innovations in 10x, we've said, let's not connect one island nation, let's connect them all. And that spurred this thinking of Pacific Connect. So reducing that digital divide is critical. The second is reliability, right? With the advent of cloud, with the advent of more and more digitization of the world, society itself almost depends on internet connectivity more than anything. I think that, as I said earlier, if the power goes down in my house, that's fine, as long as my daughter's tablet can still connect, right? Society depends on internet connectivity for healthcare, for education, even for shopping. And then the last is resilience. We know bad days are going to happen, right? South Pacific or the Pacific Islands are in a unique position where they experience typhoons, they experience subsea volcanoes erupting, things that are happening. So how can we use technology so that when those bad days occur, we can recover quickly? So the primary objective of Pacific Connect are the 3 Rs: reach, reliability, and resilience. We'll build a subsea cable for any one of those 3 reasons, but in every system that we build and everything that Google does, we focus on 3 principles. The first principle is sustainability, and this goes back to your comments on global warming and what can we do. We often measure in my space how many kilowatt hours of power does it take to deliver internet capacity and how can we reduce. And I've actually learned a lot from the Pacific Islands in this space, whether it's the seawater air conditioning that we were introduced to in a hospital in French Polynesia, or the hydroelectric power generation in Fiji that is producing a power rate lower than what we experience in parts of the US. Sustainability is core to what we do. The second are local partnerships. As we said, Google can't go at this alone. We partner with the local carriers in each one of these island nations where Google can provide trunk capacity, but ultimately they need to connect the users. And how can we foster and promote partnerships in the communities that we serve? And the finally is an open internet. It is an open and neutral infrastructure for all, equally and freely available access to the world's information. So why does Google need subsea cables? Quite frankly, Google revolves around data, right? So in some ways, the factories of today's era are data centers. And fiber optic subsea cables are the railroads that connect them together, right? We need to provide this new way of trade. The data must be constantly updated, backed up, and fast and secure. So the basics. Here's an example. We have a Guam ICT facility. That Guam ICT facility will connect to a landing station. That landing station will go to a submarine cable. We have a piece of Halilai here, which I'll be leaving with the governor, which is a cable that physically lays on the floor of the ocean, connecting Guam all the way to the countries that you see. The example you see on the screen would be the cloud region that we have in Oregon. And there's a physical connection all the way from Guam to these locations. Here's an example of the cable. The fiber optic strands are shown in the middle. They then have a set of stability and armoring, copper for powering the cable, and then a polyethylene jacket. So the cable on the left is a lightweight core cable. It goes into the deepest part of the ocean, and it's about the size of your thumb, a ½ inch in diameter. And then as we get closer and closer to the shore, you add layers of armoring to protect you against anchor drops or fishing issues. And they go up to about 2 inches, but the fiber in the cable is the same. Here's an example of the different layers. So in the lower right, you see 5 different subsea cables going all the way from double armoring on the right to the lightweight cable on the left and every number in between. In the lower left, you see an example of a cable being laid in the belly of the ship. So a cable gets manufactured, put into the belly of the ship, and then we have a ship starting from the US and going all the way to Guam, dropping the cable onto the ocean floor. There are multiple strands that go inside of the cable. We talk about them in pairs because it's often send and receive. And each pair delivers connectivity anywhere from 20 to 30 terabits and up. So let's talk about Central Pacific Connect. We're excited to announce this connectivity of Halailai and Bulikula and the Fiji connection. And you can see this ring going all the way through the central portion of the Pacific. In October, we announced the South Pacific Connect Initiative during President Biden, Prime Minister of Australia's state visit, where we announced Tembua and Hona Moana. And just last week, we announced the first extension from French Polynesia to South America on the Humboldt cable system in partnership with Chile. So you can see here, this is really an initiative across multiple stakeholders. It's much bigger than Google. I get the pleasure here of representing all of them, but we'll be releasing this shortly in a blog post. So thank you all for the time, and thank you, Governor, for coming and for the opportunity to really connect the world.
Thank you, Brian. And now we get to the fun part of tonight. We're going to get to our question and answer period. Before we get to that, though, I believe Crystal had a few last instructions, and I'll turn it over to her for questions from the media there in Guam, as well as some of our partners here in DC as well.
Well, Hafide, and good evening to you in DC, and Hafide again, and good morning to my media colleagues here on Guam. As promised, I have more special instructions for our media partners so we can go through this Q&A round. If you are interested in asking a question, please type your name and publication in the chat window. We'll call on you one by one to unmute yourself, and then please pose your question. We kindly request that you only ask one question at a time in order to give everyone equal opportunity to have their question asked and answered. Also, most of you have asked for spellings of names, and if we will be issuing a press release that will follow immediately after this event. So Joseph Titano, Pacific Daily News, you may unmute yourself and pose your question.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for sharing info about this new opportunity for Guam. I'm wondering, for the person at home, for the end user, how is this going to benefit them? Is this going to result in improved affordability, connection speed, reduced latency? Is there anything special about the cables that Google is going to be laying that might be new to Guam?
So I think there's a number of critical factors. The first is latency. So if you look at the latency today for connectivity from Guam to Google, you will see a fundamental shift in the time that it takes to hit a Google front end, have a reaction, and have a result to a query. So you will see changes in latency that fundamentally transform the speed of the internet in Guam. I think the second is scalability. These are next generation cables that we're building, both the Echo, Apricot, and TPU cables that were announced that connect Guam to the US, as well as the Central Pacific cable connecting Guam to Fiji and French Polynesia, and then onwards to other places. And then the third is reliability. Bad days happen, and by having multiple paths, you can assure much better likelihood of uptime. So I think those are the three pieces: latency, capacity, and reliability. Thank you.
Could I add also, Joe, you know that we have also been given a grant through the federal government, through the Department of Commerce, which is the BEAD, which you're probably familiar with. And this is a $156 million grant. And we've just had an approval of our action plan. And one of the underlying influences and drive with this is to improve latency in Guam. We do have a problem with latency in Guam. And so from the cable point of view, that's important to complement what we want to do in the land area. And we're going to be pushing out a lot of resources to work in partnership with data centers, or to also establish and provide more options for data centers using this BEAD program. So you'll have the information coming through the cable and then being distributed out to the end users through an improved data center.
Thank you so much, Joe from PDN, for your question. Nestor Lecanto, KUAM.
Yes, thanks, Crystal. And questions for Brian. Can you talk a little bit more about why you selected Guam and its advantages as a landing spot for subsea cables?
I think there's a number of reasons and items that go into consideration, but Guam today already acts as a hub for a number of subsea systems. You're seeing connectivity from Guam to a large portion of Asia Pacific, as well as connectivity to Guam to the United States. So I think that when you're building a network of connectivity, it's not just about one cable or one announcement, but how you can bring together a literal network of systems that allow multiple paths for traffic. So I think Guam's geographical presence and long history as a digital hub are critical for its foundation as a node in this initiative. You see that same instance repeated in both Fiji and French Polynesia. So I think combining these across multiple island nodes sits very well for the reliability of connectivity for the Pacific.
Yeah, and as a follow-up, you mentioned the two cables would connect Guam to Fiji and Guam to French Polynesia. All very beautiful places, but very small markets. I'm wondering why connect these places, and is that cost effective for Google?
Yeah, so I think that if you when you see the blog and you see the diagram that was up here shortly, in October we announced two new systems. Tambua, which connects the U.S. directly to Fiji and Fiji to Australia. Similarly, you'll connect on Hono Moana, the U.S. to French Polynesia and French Polynesia to Australia. And the early announcements in Guam were Echo, which connects the U.S. to Guam and Guam to Singapore, TPU, which is a second path from U.S. to Guam and Guam to Taiwan and the Philippines. So each one of these three nodes will have scalable connectivity, both to the U.S. and towards Asia-Pacific countries, and Central Pacific gets the advantage of those core trunk international connections and affording that to the islands. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. And if I could just get one more question for the governor. Gov, can you talk about the economic impact of these cables and the other cables, direct and indirect, for Guam?
Sure. I think the economic impact is going to just be enhanced. As you know, businesses, government rely a lot on communication information. And communication information, I think, is key to any kind of investments, any kind of business establishments, any kind of growth in commerce and trade. And so there's going to be a lot of economic, I think, investment going forward, knowing that Guam's going to be a place that will have this quick, rapid internet information system. I also do know that it will also create jobs, and these would be high professional paying jobs. I know that in the age of digitalization and career paths in these areas requires a lot of higher institution academia, and I know that the University of Guam is poised to provide that. So we will see more of our people going into coding, programming, and so forth, which I think just, again, gives them a better income wage level and capacity. So there's a lot of direct and indirect. And I think, but to us in the Pacific, the more I think important is, like Brian said, to bridge the digital divide, and so that these other islands can get the same kind of benefits that we're looking at with Guam. And we always believe that if our island brothers and sisters are successful, we will be successful too, and we are as successful as they are. So a lot of good future, I think, benefits and outcomes, very positive. I'm just very excited about this. I think this is so great for Guam and so great for our brothers and sisters in the islands. They're always looking for resources and opportunities to improve their quality of life. So it's just not from an economic standpoint, but from an overall well-being and quality of life.
Thank you. I'll pass it on and I'll wait for the next round.
Thank you, Nestor. John O'Connor from the Guam Daily Post. John O'Connor from the Guam Daily Post. He's having issues with technology. We'll come back to him. Naina Rao from
Will be
KPRG.
addressed quite shortly.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for holding this event. I'm hoping you could hear me okay.
Loud and clear.
Perfect. So my question is, I'm wondering about the equity issue. There are many Pacific Islanders in Tuvalu and Vanuatu who still do not have access to digital devices, right, to connect the internet. I'm wondering how, while Google is bringing internet connectivity to Guam, how it's going to be equitably distributed for Pacific Islanders to use.
Yes, we're in very active discussions right now with both Tuvalu and Vanuatu. I can tell you that I have a meeting with Noe, the CEO of Tuvalu Telecommunications, this Friday. And we've been extremely engaged with the local partners in the community on how we can look at connectivity. In October, there was an announcement from the Australian government that they're providing funding for a branching unit on the trunk to connect Tuvalu. And we think that is one of the critical pieces where actually the governor and I were just speaking about this, where how do you go from minimal connectivity today to the fastest connectivity that we're used to, or at least I'm used to experiencing at my home in Silicon Valley. So I think the digital skilling and training and the transformation is the next phase of this that we need to just think about, right? This is a long journey. We're taking the first step here with the trunk. The second is then expanding the trunk with branches to the islands. And then the third is enabling the islands to experience this transformation. I can tell you I don't know the answers, but I know that the answers will come together. If there's something I've learned from the Pacific Islands is we need to be there and learn the solutions to these problems, because the playbook that we have in solving the problems that we have in the U.S. CONUS doesn't necessarily apply. But we are engaging directly with each one of the island countries, nations, and territories to figure out the uniqueness of each situation and find a solution together.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Naina. Oyal Niraricle from the Marianas Business Journal.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Governor.
Good
So I
morning.
have a two-part question. This is about investments. First of all, Brian, what is the investment for Google and its partners, and what is the timeline that you're looking at? And for the governor, how are you leveraging this connectivity to increase investment for Guam?
Thank you very much. So Google isn't in a position to publicly disclose investment levels at this point. I think that this is a multi-stakeholder initiative. As I said, it's much bigger than just Google, but it is substantial investments in connectivity across not just Google, but a number of other both carrier partners as well as government organizations that are interested. There was a second portion of the question on the timeline. So I can tell you that we are in the process right now of deep water surveying. So as we talked about, the cable has different levels of armoring. That armoring is determined by the subsea conditions. So that requires a survey vessel surveying the ocean floor. That then tells us how to manufacture the cable. Once the cable is manufactured, it's loaded onto a ship and then laid and turned up. So we anticipate the project being concluded to Guam by 26 Q4, and nothing so far in our progress shows that that won't be possible.
So my response to your question, Oya, is that when I speak to investors, like, for example, when I went to the U.S. Select big summit where there were investors from all over the world, the three main issues that they look for is, what is the government like in your island? Do you have a stable government? Do you have a government that they feel if issues arise can be fairly and equitably discussed and debated? Then the other question is, what is your healthcare delivery system like? And the third is, how fast can you get information? And so definitely when we go out to these conferences and summits that when we invite investors, we can add to that, hey, now we are going to have a much more enhanced, stronger, shorter latency and even no latency at all. Which is so much important to them because time matters in these businesses. And the quicker they can get their information, the quicker they can see their finances, the quicker that they can see their operational policies, the quicker that they can answer concerns and questions about their products to their customers, the better they're off. And so that's the leverage that we will be using when we do go out to provide, to enhance and invite investors. And one of the investors that we're going to be fully realizing is additive manufacturing. And additive manufacturing is a 3D supply parts production. Certainly one of the core essential ingredient for them is interconnectivity and technology and advance in data and so forth.
Thank you so much, Oya, for your question. John O'Connor is still having issues with his microphone. I will go ahead and read his question for him. He is asking whether land agencies here have already been engaged on where the cables will be landed. For example, will we see a lease agreement for the Guam Ancestral Lands Commission for the cables?
So we are in process right now of working with the landing parties. We have a number of cables that already exist and land into Guam. We've announced a number of other cables in addition to Central Pacific. So we work with all the local regulatory authorities to comply with codes and requirements that are unique to each specific geography where we land a system. And that's the standard protocol for people.
Certainly for us, if there's availability of land through the Guam Ancestral Land Commission or even through the Chamorro Land Trust, that would be a big benefit for us in terms of leasing properties to to these businesses and to Google or other network, because that would just mean more revenues to the Ancestral Lands Commission and the Chamorro Land Trust, which would just fall right back into the hands of our people.
Thank you so much, John, for that question. I did have a request for follow-ups from both Nestor and Joe Titano. Nestor?
Sorry. Thanks, Chris. Just one question. I'm wondering, Brian, if there are any growing security concerns for subsea cables, particularly in the Indo-Pacific region, in terms of digital and physical vulnerabilities.
So I think that you've probably seen news where upwards of over 90% of the world's internet traffic passes over subsea cables. There's more than 500 subsea cables throughout the world, and they are strategic assets for connecting the world as far as data transmission goes. So yes, security is a concern of us. We do monitor our cables. We rely on them for connectivity, but we feel the key or the solution is around diversity and adding additional cables. So you'll see here that going back to the earlier question, it's not just about connecting Guam to the US or Guam onward to Taiwan and the Philippines. If we can then connect Guam to Fiji, and Fiji has an alternate path to the US. So if the Guam cable gets cut, it can route down to Fiji and throughout. So we model and plan our network based on a statistical likelihood of outages, which includes things like 100-year events and weather factors that we haven't thought of. So it is a very, very detailed process and heavy investment that requires the due diligence to model a various number of scenarios to make sure that Google can stay on.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nestor. Joe Titano, followed by Oyal.
Everybody, Governor, the administration's been open about wanting to expand internet access, universal internet access across the island. Does that get us closer to that goal? Is this open the door up to partnering with Google on something in the future?
Absolutely. You know, Google is one of the leaders in the whole industry of network and telecommunications, and having them as a partner and presence in Guam is going to do just that.
Thank you, Joe. Last but not least, Oyal, for your follow-up.
Oh, sorry about that. Can you tell me, Mr. Brian, how many Google cables are in the Indo-Pacific? And then if you can't enclose the total amount of the investments, can I ask, are you thinking of the millions? Is it in the millions or the billions? Yeah, and then I have one more follow-up.
So with the announcement of Bulikala and Halailai, this will be 29 cables that Google has publicly announced investment in, and those are globally. I don't have the specific number for the Pacific. I can probably rattle them off in my head as we name them, but that would take too long. But the addition of these two cables is 29 publicly announced Google investments in subsea systems, and without disclosing the other stakeholder investments, unfortunately, I just can't comment on dollars at this point.
Okay. And are there any federal grants, U.S. federal grants, or any grants from any other nations that are helping to fund this project?
So the trunk systems that we're talking about in Central Pacific Connect are Google and the stakeholders without government funding and grants. The connections of the islands, whether it's branching units, where we've seen Australia express an interest in Tuvalu and Vanuatu. We've seen the United States provide funding and announced in the October 25th Joint Leaders Statement connecting Kiribati and Marshall and Chuuk. There are a number of branching units and island connections that are associated with either specific island funding or U.S., Japan, and other connections. But the trunk cable itself is being funded between Google and the stakeholders like Telstra and ATH and those previously mentioned.
Thank you, Brian. We're
Thank
a
you.
little bit over time. Crystal, are there any other, we probably have time for one last question. Is there anything else that you're seeing on your side?
No other questions and no other follow-ups from any of our media partners.
All
We're
right.
done.
Well, Crystal, I'll turn it back to you to wrap up. Thank you very much for this, for a good question and answer period. Crystal, I'll turn it to you to wrap it up.
Well, I just want to thank all our media partners for joining us today, our morning here on Guam and our evening in DC. Again, wonderful how technology can connect us. Our governor, of course, joining us from DC. Tomorrow she'll be testifying before the Committee on Natural Resources. Again, thank you for the opportunity to partner and share this news and milestone for Guam and Google with all of you today. The Google blog post will post in about 10 minutes. Additional information can be found there, or you can reach out to me directly. This is Masi, everyone, and Viva Google, Viva Guam.
Viva.
Viva!
Viva!